Welcome to the music room for January 17th, 2016. About a month ago, I bought that Heart Like a Wheel album, and actually bought three other albums at the same time. And one of them was this one here. This is Chicago 9. That's also their greatest hit at the time. This was released in 1975. I saw this and immediately thought of my first childhood friend that I made in Los Alamos. His name was Christian. And I brought this album home and I played the first side of it, and I started thinking about all these things I'd done with Christian, and he's had kind of a major influence on my life. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about him because today is Christian's birthday. In 1973, we moved to Los Alamos. I was in 5th grade, and in homeroom I sat at a table with 4 other boys. Here's a picture there. I'm on the right. And to my left is a kid named Jeff. I don't know Jeff's last name. Then there's next to him is James. James later became Cheech. It was his nickname and all throughout school. JJ there on the end, and Christian's to my right. I did all the kind of the childhood things with Christian when I was growing up. Let me see. In Los Alamos, Christian and I walked across the Pegasus Bridge together. And well, we got in some trouble here and there, and well, we don't need to go into that. But I will say that two things. Well, there's a lot of things about Christian that had a major influence on me. Christian and I started taking apart electronics that we would find. People would throw away things like televisions, and I remember that we picked up a U-Her tape deck, a reel-to-reel tape deck, and we tore all that apart and took out all the switches and made use of all that electronics. Let me see what else was there. We both of us kind of purchased a go-kart together, and it had like a 3 horsepower Briggs and Stratton engine in it. We learned about how to work on that, and it was one of those things. It was kind of a piece of junk, and it didn't actually have brakes. Kind of a theme here we'll talk about in a minute. So when Christian would ride it around, or anybody would ride it around, they had to kind of put their feet down like Fred Flintstone. You could see the road underneath you, and so you'd have to kind of, put your feet down like Fred did to stop. But I remember one time he drove away from our house on 45th Street, and he lived over on 47th at the time, and he just fires it up, gets in, gets on, and drives away. And I thought, wow, this must be what it's like to be a grown-up, as he was driving back to his house. This is like in, 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that. So let me see, what else did I have here? Well, at some point I ended up buying my first motorcycle. It was a CL90, and that thing never started right. The go-kart was hard to start as well. And I kind of learned some things right then about how to start cars, how to start combustion engines. Because the first 2 things I had ever had were that go-kart and my Honda motorcycle, which never started. And so when I have a trouble starting something, I kind of reminded of Christian and our days with those 2 things. Let me see, what else did I write here? He also had here's some photos of Christian here. This first one here is we went as a family trip. The Holobos went to the Four Corners in probably 1975, and we went to Mesa Verde, and we also went camping up in Utah in Bland Canyon, and so we took Christian along with us. That's a picture of him there at Mesa Verde. And then here's another one. When we first got our Brownie cameras, we were taking all the classic photos, and here's a picture of Christian. I think he's probably holding up his brother. Yeah, so Christian, he, let me see here. They lived over on 47th Street. There's 4 boys in Christian's family. The youngest one was Alec, and then there was Alistair and Christian, and then their older brother's name was Jason. And they lived over there with their mother, and she was a divorced mother, and Christian's father lived up in the Hamas. And I remember that when we'd go visit Christian's dad, there was an old 1964 pickup truck up there that we could drive. And I mean, we're talking about when I was 13, Christian and I could go out driving it around, down the road from his house, down to the main highway there. And it's kind of weird, but that thing never had brakes either. So we learned how to bleed the brakes in that old Ford, and we had to do that every time before we wanted to drive it down, because otherwise they didn't work. And even after we did that, they didn't work very well, and you had to kind of pump them a lot. So we definitely knew what brake fade was when we were 13. Yeah, I kind of getting off track here. Over there on 47th Street, when they all lived together, they had a that family didn't have a lot of money, and so their clothes weren't like too shabby, but they had definitely a lot of hand-me-downs, and they never really had anything. I just remember that the neighbor across the street would always be calling Child Protective Services on those guys, for real no reason. I mean, they're just boys being boys. But he was a pain in the ass. And so there was this constant struggle with trying to keep those guys, keep them together. So what brings me to this Chicago album here. I think when I was probably in 7th grade, let me see, that one, it must have been 7th grade. I was over at Christian's house, and we decided to stop there and have a little lunch. So he looks in the refrigerator and he sees that there's some stuff in there that we can make a lunch out of. And he says, well, let's go put some music on. So he goes in the living room. In their living room, they didn't really have much furniture in there, but they had a stereo with a bunch of albums. And I think that's the first time that I know that that's the first time I saw Jethro Tull Stand Up, Beatles Revolver, the Moody Blues, the Days of Future Past, and the last one was I saw Electric Ladyland. And the reason why I remember that is because I don't know if they had the original UK release of that or their album came with a poster, but that album was released with the original cover was 21 naked women on the cover, and I remember seeing that over there at their house. So we're looking through all these, and I really remember looking at the band name, the Moody Blues, and I'm like, what is this? So I think I saw Machine Head over there. Well, this album was on the turntable, so Christian just left it on there. Now, this is how old are you in 7th grade? Like 13 or something like that. Let me put this on first. So Christian goes in, he starts making his ham sandwich. And for me, when I made sandwiches at home, you just get out the lunch meat and, put some mustard down on a piece of bread and put some cheese on there, slice of cheese, and eat it. Christian, they didn't have slices there. They had a whole ham. And Christian got out the cutting board. He pulled out a knife. He cut the ham in a slice. He cut about 4 slices of ham, and then he diced it. Then he got out a pan. He put a little butter in there, and he heated up the ham. And I was like, wow, how do you know how to do this? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm just cooking a ham sandwich. So then he put the cheese on top of that and slightly melted it, and took that ham and cheese and put it on our bread, and we put our mustard on top of that and ate that as a warm ham sandwich. And until that point, I didn't really know that boys could cook, and Christian was a natural at it. And so in the background, Chicago was playing, and so I'm reminded of Christian a lot when I actually put the pan. What is it, like 30 years later, 40 years later? I put a pan on a stove probably, 50 times a year. I'm reminded of Christian because I look down in that pan and I see that ham. It's quite amazing. And this Chicago album isn't really played that often. In fact, I probably haven't heard this in decades. And I went ahead and listened to this. This is a great album. Like I said, this is the greatest hits album. It's not referred to that. It's referred to as Chicago 9. So if you really want to get a good album, go ahead and pick this one up. So Christian and that guy Cheech at that table there, both of those guys dropped out of high school. And that was kind of a rarity in Los Alamos. Most of the people, probably 97% of the people ended up going to college. Christian didn't graduate from high school. And lost contact with Christian at some point in junior high. I didn't really lose contact. He was still around, but we weren't as close as we were when we were in elementary school. And I actually started hanging around with his brother, Alistair. And Alistair's going to be another segment of the music room at some point. I heard that Christian was cooking at I saw him twice in the last probably 20 years. One time I saw him, he was at the Hilltop House. He was working as a chef at the Hilltop House. That's a restaurant that was hooked on to a hotel there in Los Alamos. And about 10 years later, I found out that he was working at Marie Callender's in Albuquerque. So I stopped in over there and pulled him out on a break and talked to him for about 5 minutes. And I said, how's it going? He says, I like working here. I like making those pies. I love making pies here at Marie Callender's. And then he kind of abruptly said, I got to get back to work. And he just got up and went back to work. And that was kind of the last time I saw him. So when I bought this album, about a month ago, I decided I got to record this. And so I figured, let me see if I can find him. And unfortunately, I found his gravestone there in Los Alamos. He ended up dying in 2007, so it's 9 years ago. And so, he's one of my first friends that kind of passed away. All right, I'm recording this today to tell you that Christian had a dramatic impact on my life in 3 different areas. The first one was electronics. We tore apart anything we could get our hands on in 5th and 6th grade, and that kind of ignited my passion for electronics and electrical engineering. And so, that's what I do today. That's 40 years later. I still love that stuff. I still love taking apart things. Second one is, I do believe I can start any, combustion engine, only because I had to start that damn go-kart and that motorcycle so many times. I kind of, when I get in, I kind of have a feel for what the engine's telling me, just based on the feel of it. And I'm pretty good at that. And the last one is for cooking. I love cooking, and until I actually saw Christian enjoy the fact that he was making a hot ham and cheese sandwich, I didn't really get it. And whenever I, put a pan down on the stove and I look down at that pan, I do think of Christian a lot. And so, and because I found this album, I've been thinking about him a lot more lately. So, happy birthday, Christian. This is the Music Room for January 17th, 2016.
Does anybody really know what time it is?